There's JP. Hi, everybody. Okay. JP, there you are. Okay, let's see. Can I pin for everyone? Spotlight for everyone. There you are. Hi, JP.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Very well.
Good. Okay, well, I'm going to give people about 2 minutes to log in since we're just a couple of minutes early. And I want everybody to be able to catch us from the start if possible. Let's see. Oh, yes, I will do that. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Gina. I'm sorry about that. I meant to enable that. Okay, so live trials. Yep, we got that. How is everybody? I hope everybody's doing really well. Our lovely tribe here that we have. Let's see. Okay, 1 minute. So I don't know how much of an intro I need to do. I've got an intro for Jean-Pierre. I think most people know him, but I did want to start out with a little intro for him because there might be new people. We're getting new people joining all the time. So there might be people who didn't do the reboot or haven't, aren't familiar with him working with Chef AJ on UWL. So I'm just going to start off with a little intro, and then we're just going to get into a topic that Jean-Pierre would like to talk to us about. And let's see. So welcome everybody. It's 4 o'clock straight up. And I know Jean-Pierre has a meeting promptly at 5. So I'm going to get started. I'm not going to wait too long to get started today. So while most people may know JP as the vegan celebrity trainer, since he's worked with stars like Emily Deschanel, Pamela Anderson, Ellen DeGeneres, and Joaquin Phoenix, he brings so much more to the table than that. He has more than 35 years of experience in the nutrition and fitness field and has developed cutting-edge programs with a blend of science and ancient modalities. JP is also a pioneer in the brain building field for the elderly and created the first brain building programs utilizing a plant-based diet and nutraceuticals over 25 years ago. He has 2 books he's written, The Pillars of Health and Strong, Savvy, and Safe, as well as cooking DVDs, exercise videos, and numerous online programs. JP also runs a nonprofit organization called Living with Harmony that works to heal, inspire, and transform the lives of people, animals, and the planet through the education of not only plant-based living, but planet-based living. He entertains and captivates his audiences by offering up life-changing strategies in an easy-to-understand method. Please welcome Jean-Pierre. Hi, JP.
Hi there. Thanks. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Good to be here with you. And thanks, Toby, for getting this and making this happen, too.
Absolutely. I was wondering if you could start. I know you have a topic that you want to talk about with us today, but could you just kind of expand on the info that I already gave and maybe share a little bit about how you like to work with folks? Because I know that you kind of have a different approach sometimes maybe than other coaches and consultants or trainers.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question to start with. I've been vegan for close to 40 years, and I started around high school for ethical reasons. I just didn't want to cause harm where I didn't have to. Everywhere we walk or drive, maybe insects and things may die by accident, but I didn't want to intentionally cause harm. So I started really around high school. And as you said, my background really is in geriatrics. So that's where I spent a good majority of my time, was retirement homes, senior centers, adult daycare centers, facilities that, had mainly older adults there. And that's when I created these brain building courses. That was over 25 years ago. And not only did I do plant-based nutrition and nutraceuticals, so nutrients for the brain, but I also created mental classes on it. So we actually sat down and we did mental exercises. And then I created like a physical boot camp. So I used industrial strength bubble machines, agility ladders, all sorts of different things to stimulate what we call neuroplasticity and really get the brain turned on. What I was seeing is that most of these retirement homes and facilities, they had a lot of entertainment, like Banjo Joe would come in, play the banjo, which is great. And maybe somebody play the piano and sing. But these seniors needed to be back in school. And one of the big things as you know, from working with me, is I'm very big into education. We have to always keep upping the ante and continue staying abreast of the latest science and the studies that are out there. So I just wanted these seniors that supposedly were retiring not to retire their brain or their body. So that was a good portion of my work is in geriatrics. And of course, I've worked a lot with people with obesity. And, you know, I had kids come in the office as young as 12, 270 pounds. So you have diabesity, you've got diabetic kids, and they're obese. And then, of course, you know, they have heart disease because kids that have been autopsied in automobile accidents when they've passed away as young as 3 have had plaque already in the arteries. And we've seen already by the time they're teenagers, they have measurable blockages. So I've spent a lot of time working with kids, a lot with attention deficit hyperactivity. And then I've worked with, of course, athletes, law enforcement, military, and so forth. But the underlying, I guess you would say, philosophy that I have is it's all based on love and compassion. So no matter who I'm working with, I use a more of a love approach where we have to learn to be kind to ourselves and to other people, but especially to ourselves, especially at first. So everything I do is about adding more good into your life. I really don't work worrying too much with clients about taking the bad out. It's I just keep adding so much good in that eventually bad will not exist. And so that's how I work with people. I work very gently and slowly, but I can work quickly. In other words, if people I work with, military and athletes, they want to know what's the best way to eat, what's the best way to do it, I'll go right into that. But for most people, like you and I, we kind of need our hand held and we need to go slow and take steps up the stairs, slowly. So my approach is individualized, but it's always love-based for sure.
And I did work with you. Yeah, I've worked with you a couple of times throughout the years, but there was the first time that I started working out with you, or working with you, I shouldn't say working out, although part of it was working out, but it was so much more than that. It's really, you're one of those people, I find it really hard to box you in. Like if somebody said, well, tell me about JP, I would have to go through, I mean, I kind of wrote that little biography there. It's like I took it from pieces I knew of you, pieces from your website and stuff, but there's so much more that I could tell people about you because you don't fit neatly into a box, but that is very true. You do really come from a place of love and compassion. And I have to say, when I was working with you back in early 2012, for about maybe 4, 5, 6 months, something like that, honestly, JP, that was the time I felt like I was in my best physical shape. I mean, I felt like really strong, healthy, and I looked good. It was all really good. So you just bring so much to the table, like I said. I know that today you wanted to touch on kind of the mental side of eating healthy and discuss like food addiction. So I'm just going to turn the stage over to you and let you take it away.
Yeah. It's really, it really brings tears to my eyes when I think about food addiction, because so many people kind of poo-poo it and don't really acknowledge it. And they just don't realize that food addiction is more real than almost any other addiction in the world, because everybody has to eat. And the majority of people in the United States, most of their diet is either processed foods or animal products. So their diets are loaded with salt, some sort of oil or fat, and sugar. And they're constantly getting bombarded with stimulants like, coffee or tea, caffeine, and they're always in this hyper mode. And then there's people out there saying that, it really doesn't exist, food addiction and things like that. And it's kind of silly, because why can you be addicted to a drug or alcohol, but you can't be addicted to a processed food? It's kind of like if somebody sticks a knife in your arm, it doesn't matter if it's the knife in there or a fork or a razor. It's a tool that elicits a response, right? And then it's pain. So it doesn't matter to me if somebody's a sex addict, if somebody is an addiction to stealing, kleptomania, or they have an addiction to alcohol or sugar. It doesn't matter what you want to call it. Who cares? 100% of those things are changing the chemistry in the brain. That's all you need to know. Just like 100% of the pain when something's sticking in your arm, that's changing the chemistry in your brain, making you go, ouch. Don't worry what the addiction is from. And so, having this calm, stable brain is one of the hallmark signs of very balanced individual. And most of the people, well, all the ones that I've ever met that have food addictions are far, far, far from being balanced in their life. As a matter of fact, they kind of look mentally like a roller coaster. We have highs and lows, highs and lows, high and lows all day long. It's never anything consistent. And that's really startling. It's scary because it's kind of like a bipolar. And for me, I see it with so many clients, and I see these poor kids who have attention deficit. These average kids, when I'm seeing them, imagine this, Zena, when I see a kid that comes in the office or I'm seeing them in person, I literally have to visualize a clock on top of their forehead, and I know I've got 8 seconds until they lose attention. So literally, when I say something, here's how I talk to a lot of the kids. I take my finger and go, hey, look here. And then I'm as I start talking, I'm watching that clock ticking for 8 seconds. And I know when 8 seconds is up, that's it. And I got to move on to something else, give them a break. It's unbelievable. So we're seeing a lot of a mental decline, I think in the last 20 years, but definitely since the pandemic hit, we've seen even more mental decline for sure. And I work a lot with therapists. So they're my clients, and many of them are trauma therapists that deal with trauma and they deal with addiction. And they have told me that their offices are 100% booked and they have huge waiting lists. So, mentally, I think we need to start approaching this so-called diet industry and addictions. We need to talk about it mentally a little bit, and not just you need to eat a little bit more kale and some potatoes, because that's just not going to do it. It's kind of like when somebody gets, a gastric bypass. I have a lot of clients that get gastric bypass, and I don't understand. Nothing happened between their ears. So the addiction that they have, they're just still going to eat till they blow their stomach open. And I see that all the time with my clients. You have to change this first before you're worrying about changing your weight. Anyone in the world can lose weight quickly if you're willing to suffer. And so people who come to me, if the first thing 90% of them say is, I want to lose weight. And it's like the worst thing I can hear somebody to say, because the first thing I say to them, excellent. How much can you suffer? Because when I want to help a client lose weight, if a celebrity is getting paid $20 million to get ready for a film in 4 months, you don't actually think there's any celebrity out there that's not suffering. I mean, they're restricting their food to sometimes a couple pieces of cabbage or an apple a day, and they're exercising on a treadmill hours at a time. That's called suffering, but that's not a healthy way to do it. So the problem is everybody constantly asks me about weight loss, and I say, look at, if you live a healthy lifestyle and you learn to have a calm, stable brain, not only will you get to be an ideal weight, but your blood pressure will go down, your heart will be better, everything will be better about you, your moods, your skin, your energy, everything gets better. But we just keep talking about weight loss. And I rarely use the term ever in my work with clients. I only use it when I'm doing Zoom programs and things, because that's all people can relate to, is if I use that term weight loss. It's really hard for it to even get out of my mouth. Does that make sense? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry. I had muted myself because I didn't want any ambient noise to interrupt you. So yes, it absolutely makes sense.
So a couple of things, right off the bat, I know we don't have a ton of time to go into it, but it's interesting. I did a Zoom series, and I should give you my information quickly first, so you don't have to watch the whole program over. But if you go to johnpierre.com, that's my site. And then livingwithharmony.org is my animal sanctuary site. But on johnpierre.com, I have a Zoom program. It's called the Pillars of Health Coaching. And on the first video, it's 17 hours of content. But on the first video, I talk about quite a bit about food addiction. And one of the things that I say in that video is, with my clients, I want them to have we're just going to use this term, 3 blasts of dopamine a day. And we can define dopamine and we can talk about the science behind it, because it's really more of an anticipatory. It's more when you're anticipating food and things than when you're having it. But nonetheless, we're going to just say, I want my clients to have 3 dopamine blasts a day from food. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's all the dopamine blasts you get from food. But I want you to have at least 20 to 30 to 40 more dopamine blasts a day. And that has to come from life. So there has to be more pleasure in your life than food. Because if somebody said to you, if you asked them, where do you get pleasure? And they said, oh, just sex. You think that seems, wow, strange. If they said just drinking alcohol, really? That's the only time you have pleasure? You think something's wrong there. And that's the case with most people, is the only enjoyment they find in life is from food. And it's not whole food most of the time, it's processed foods. So one thing that I do that's kind of unusual is I ask people to make a list for me of things that bring them enjoyment. And I'll tell you, I have a lot of clients that stop after about 2 or 3 and they can't really do much more. And I'm like, really? Gosh, by the time it's 9 o'clock, I've already had 20 dopamine blasts. I mean, volunteering, I have, over 20 animals, so I'm taking care of animals. I'm doing volunteer work. I'm helping people out. I mean, those are all things that I enjoy doing. I mean, if you don't have a lot of dopamine blasts coming in from life and you only rely on food, of course, you're going to be more addicted to foods because everybody wants pleasure. We move toward pleasure and we move away from pain. So if your only pleasure in life is food, guess where you're moving? Toward food. A lot of people say to me, hey, JP, you don't seem to enjoy food. Oh, no, I enjoy food as much as anyone else does. Absolutely. It's just that there's other things in life to enjoy other than food. And just like when I eat a meal, I just don't want to eat one food. I'd like a variety of food when I eat my meal. And it's the same thing in life. I want my clients to have a variety of dopamine blast, a variety of fun other than food. Does that kind of ring a bell for you, Zena?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Can I ask you a question here? I wasn't going to ask questions, but this is really, I think it might help other people as well. So what do you say, like when you have somebody who can only come up with 1 or 2 or 3 things that give them enjoyment, how do you work with them at that point to help them bring more stuff into their world that gives them enjoyment? Because I know that for myself, even, I used to have a much broader range of things that would give me enjoyment. But as life has gone on, and as things, have become stressful or what have you, I've lost things and I haven't gotten them back. And when I even think about them, I don't have that same sense of like even desire to do them. So how do you work with people who are kind of stuck that way?
That is a genius question. And here's the interesting thing. This is where we start going down other detours and rabbit holes, because when they come to remember, they're coming to me to so-called lose weight. And suddenly within the first session, I'm doing all this introspective work and they're freaking out because they're like, oh, wait, I thought this was about weight loss. I was like, well, it can be, but we first have to come to, a little discussion about some of your issues you have going on. So that's a great question. And that's when I start going more into the emotional / spiritual work. And then again, that even takes more of a divergence away from food. So I just do a lot of introspective exercises. I ask them a lot of different questions. And I also remind them that the longer in the past that they've been addicted to food or any other substance, remember, let's just pretend the brain just wants the pleasure center hit. All it cares is it goes ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. That's all the brain cares about. The brain doesn't know that the ding dongs are coming from heroin, because when it was created, you look to primitive time, the only time people got ding dong was when they ate food or had sex, right? So the ding dongs never came from heroin or riding a roller coaster or whatever. So this is a great question you're asking. The longer that you've gone ding dong, ding dong, ding dong with food, what motivation is there to find other ding dongs, right, from life? Because the brain doesn't care about anything but hearing the ding dong go on. And the reason why is because the brain thinks that the ding dong is from high calorie foods or sex. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what we need to do then is, explain to the person in a gentle, loving, kind way that what's happening, what's going on here, and why it's so important to their health, vitality, and relationships with family and friends to be a little bit more balanced in your approach to life. And so then that's when now we go into session after session after session, working just on that. And again, they're wondering, where's all the food work? We can't work on food yet because we need to work on this. And I'll be honest with you, that's why I actually try many times to talk people out of seeing me. I get people all the time to want to see me, and I say, maybe you should read my book or watch my Zoom session would be the best thing first. Because this stuff it's like going to therapy. It's like therapy can be painful. And a lot of my clients who are therapists, I do the exact same thing to them. I turn tables around, and suddenly now we're doing introspection with the therapist. Now they are generally more open to it because it's their profession. And if they're not open to it, I kind of put a mirror up and I say, hey, wait a minute, aren't you a mental health professional? Isn't this what you do with your clients? And you're not willing to do it here. And then they really realize what was going on. They see that. So anyway, so that's kind of what we need to do, is we need to start looking at the pleasures that you have in life and trying to raise your standard of living so there's more fun and enjoyment and love and connection from something other than food. So that's why I said in my Zoom series, and I'm not saying this to be funny, but I'm just saying with my clients, I say it this way: you get 3 dopamine blasts a day from food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then that's it. You don't get to keep having the snacks in between and having this long drawn out meal. As a matter of fact, when my clients are done eating, 100% of the time, I want them to eat about 80% to full, where they still could eat not quite a bit more, but a little bit more. And then as soon as they're done eating, I want them to doing something fun. So I actually have them program that. They're writing all the things that are fun. And then they have to say, after breakfast, here's what I'm doing that's fun. After lunch, here's what I'm doing. And then after dinner. So that's kind of how I work with that with clients, is I'm working more emotionally and mentally. So the ding dongs that occur in the brain occur throughout the day, but I also want the ding dongs not to have consequences. So if you're eating processed foods, you're getting a lot of pleasure, but short-term pleasure, long-term pain. I'm more interested in them having ding dongs and getting the brain to be happy. And then with that happiness is no consequences. So there's not a consequence to, taking your dog for a walk or petting your cat or getting a massage or exercising. Those are all things that give you pleasure, but then they also give you benefit again and again and again. It's kind of like interest that you get. You didn't have to do anything afterwards and you still got interest. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes.
And one of the things that I recommend to people, and you've probably heard it a million times, and I've been teaching it for, maybe 20 years, is you have to sanitize your environment. You've got to keep your environment clean, and not just at home, but everywhere you go. Many of you have maybe heard, I don't know if you've ever interviewed Shada.
And she's actually going to be on in a month again. Yes, we have, and she will be back next month. So yeah.
Oh, good. And by the way, I'll be on, if you go to YouTube and just look up Healthy Cooking with Shada, I'll be on her show next Thursday. Awesome. And I was on I think she has 2. I was on twice in the last month, so you could see some of the recordings. But one of the things with her is that when she went on vacation, she couldn't control that environment. So I had to, in a sense, be there. So I had to have her take photos of the food. I had to have her call me, and I had to have her text me, because I had to make sure that we're controlling the environment she's in, because if not, then all of a sudden those little temptations pop up and they call your name because you remember ding dong, and that food's going to give you a ding dong. And right now you're not feeling a lot of pleasure. And so you see that, you smell that, and all of a sudden you want that pleasure again, like everyone else, but I have to keep her on the straight and narrow. So sanitizing your environment, of course, means keeping your house clean of tempting foods. But also with my clients, I don't even want them looking at TV ads or reading magazines that have pictures of chocolate cake or ice cream or something like that. Because as you get weaker and you're more beaten down toward the end of the day, you're more inclined to follow with one of those impulses. And that's one of the things people get, is something called decision fatigue. And I talk quite a bit about that in my seminars. But that's why some of the most successful people in the world dress the same way every day. Whether it's Steve Jobs or Zuckerberg, from Facebook, why do they dress the same? They don't want to have to be making any more decisions than they're already required to make. So the less decisions you have to make, the less fatigued the battery is in the brain, and the better you're going to be at making decisions. Here's the key thing: as the day goes on. Do you notice how most people start failing as the day goes on? Later and later, their defenses weaken. It's like running a marathon. You think you have as much energy at mile 25 as you did 1? No, you weaken the battery. So that's why that environmental control and sanitizing your environment is so important.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And like you said, decision fatigue, also making making decisions, like that's one of the things why I think eating very similarly day after day really helps, because when I go to the grocery store, I have a grocery list with me and I keep it electronically so I can just check, just as a little reminder if I need, oh, I need that or whatever. But honestly, I can go to the store and I can just boom, 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 and just pick up all my stuff. And because I'm pretty much using the same things over and over again. I'm not trying to create brand new recipes every single week. I mean, maybe once in a while I'll do something different, but usually I keep it pretty similar. And I find just being simple, it just really helps me reduce the number of decisions I have to make about what I'm eating every day.
Yeah, and I go into detail on this. Right before the pandemic, I had a conference in Chicago that I did, and I'm doing another one next Memorial Day in Chicago. And I really go into quite a bit of detail. It's usually a 3-day conference, and I go into quite a bit of detail on rituals. And I go through a morning ritual, an afternoon ritual, an evening ritual, and how to construct your day and your evening to best support you, not only physically, but emotionally. And that's something that we need to do, because you're tempted all day long. From the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed, there's temptations everywhere. And the truth of the matter, as soon as your alarm clock goes off, distractions start. You were fine in your sleep, there weren't any distractions, but as soon as your day begins, the distractions come, and then we're going to start having problems. And that's why that environment just gives you the edge, because it's kind of like, imagine what it'd be like to wake up to a nice clean house, right? It was just perfect. It just gives you a sense of peace and calmness. And just like they teach in feng shui about your environment, it really changes your moods and your emotions. And so it's critical to sanitize your environment so you can have a calm, stable brain. If you remember, I don't know if I think you were at the conference that I did with AJ in Las Vegas. And yeah. I spoke to the men's group there. I spoke to the men. Most of their wives were in the program, and they wanted me to speak to them about how they could better help their wives, which is really nice. But it was interesting because there was a lot of people crying in that class and really shocked when I explained to them, when you put your piece of chocolate cake in the refrigerator and you think your wife is not going to have emotional trauma from that, you're kidding yourself. Because as she's driving to work, that chocolate cake is banging on her brain. When she's at work typing away, her brain is thinking of that. When she's driving home, she's thinking of that. When she's at home, do you actually think your wife is going to have so-called the willpower to just not eat that chocolate cake? It's silly. And men were saying they had no idea that this was like a drug. And I said, absolutely. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's not a drug. I mean, in theory, you could have the same thing happen with whole foods, but most of the time it's processed foods, because those ring the bells in the brain the most. The whole foods don't ring them quite as severely.
Right. And it's really interesting what you're saying about that, with the wife driving to work and at work, then, the boss gets on her back or whatever, and she's thinking about that. And I would say, even if she gets home and she's strong enough to resist that piece of chocolate cake, she might not be strong enough to resist something else on the way home, or there might be other stuff in the house for the hubby or for the kids or whatever. And she might resist that piece of chocolate cake, but she's worn down so much by the thoughts of that, by the rest of her day. Now she's in a weakened state, and I can't have that, but I can have this, and that can become problematic as well.
That you're really smart, Zena. That is totally correct. And that's the secret of, again, that as the day goes on, your battery when you woke up was fully charged. And imagine, it's kind of like, think about when you wake up, you've got 10 bodyguards, and every hour, one of them has to leave. So by the time it's nighttime, you don't have any bodyguards. So that cake in the refrigerator, it's yours. You're going to have it. Now, there's some examples, some people, that have very strong willpower that doesn't affect, but I'm telling you, to be loving and kind, that's not most of you. That's not most of you. I can remember even when I was house sitting for one of the biggest celebrities on the planet, and they said, JP, you can have whatever you want in the refrigerator. And there was the craziest stuff I'd never even seen. And it was so expensive stuff, it was all healthy and everything. And it's like that would never be in my environment, that stuff. And I was just, it made me really think, well, gosh, I mean, imagine if everybody had a celebrity refrigerator where they opened it up and it was all these goodies. There's nobody really nobody that's not going to try all these things, because it was like a kid's birthday party with all this stuff, you know? So it's really, it's like, you know, when I go to the farmer's market, I'm buying, like now it was cherry season, peach, nectarines, you know, all the fruit. Well, I have all that stuff available. So that's what I eat. I have a hydroponic that grows lettuce and kale and things like that. So every time I walk by it, I mean, 100% of the time, I see big lettuce and kale growing there. And so I know that I have that there. So I'm controlling the environment. You know, I'm not bringing in, even though I wouldn't eat the stuff, but like, I'm sure if the house got full with chips and dips and candies and cookies, I would look at that and say, oh, wow, that'd be interesting to have that. But for the average person, they wouldn't be thinking it's interesting. They'd be tearing the bag open. So we do have to really work on, you know, the emotional stuff is key, sanitizing the environment. And I'm going to just say this, because it really, you know, I get very sad when I'm working with people. You know, I've worked as a sober companion around the world. I don't know if a lot of people know that I've traveled around the world as a sober companion to people that are extremely wealthy, that are extremely, you know, successful. And they've had me as a companion, even though I've never done drugs or alcohol or any substance, you know, stuff like that. They still are hiring me to do that. And I'm telling you, folks, this is very, very, very scary. I've seen families be destroyed from addictions. I mean, absolutely destroyed. So it makes me very sad. I don't think people understand. You know, I'm very motivated to be in this field to help people like this, because I've seen what it can do to family. I've seen it destroy families. And so one of the things that I like to encourage you to be really adamant about is don't dance with the devil. In other words, if you're going to take a little bit of a bite of this or a sip of this or a drink of that, you're really seriously fooling yourself. You are completely fooling yourself if you think that when one of my clients gets out of rehab after 60 days, I'm going to go pick them up and say, hey, do you want to throw darts at the tavern? We're not going to drink. We'll just throw darts. Yeah, we'll just have some game of darts. Do you actually think that would be a good idea? Somebody that just got out of rehab for 60 days and they start smelling the alcohol, seeing everybody smiling and laughing, immediately in their brain, right away, the sense of smell, the olfactory nerve that's in the brain or the nose goes directly to the brain.
I haven't put it on yet.
Letting open a massive amount of memories of what that alcohol used to do to you and how happy and excited you were compared to the way, you know, you didn't want to feel miserable. So immediately you're dancing with the devil. And I would suggest to you, do not under any circumstance, lower your guard and think that you're going to dance with the devil. You're going to have one little bite, one little sip. If you had that type of discipline, which some people do, well, then that's fantastic. But I doubt it. I doubt if that's you, because most likely you probably wouldn't be in a lot of the programs, you know, that are here, the Here Today, or the ones I do with Chef AJ and stuff. So I would just be very cautious and remind yourself, you know, stay away from those bad influences, keep that environment especially clean, and run as fast as you can when the devil starts approaching, because once you're in that hold from that dance, it's going to be very difficult to get out of that dance.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. JP, so in the chat, I don't know if you had seen it or not, but people are using your term ding dong to actually kind of flip it around and saying to try to get good ding dongs, you know, like, so like you want the good pleasure, you know, hits, the good dopamine hits. So they're using ding. So Tracy actually had a good comment, I think, because I totally get what she's saying. She said it's hard to find the good ding dongs all day when you work 10 plus hours a day at a job you don't like. Any suggestions? And she says, yes, even weekends. And I understand that, because I was at a job for 20 years that I hated, 20 years, and I despised that job. And I used to drive into work and I would sit in my car crying before I had to go in most of the day. So I get what she's saying. And it is really hard to do that when you're really overworked and maybe you can't leave your job. I know a lot of people would say, well, just quit. But a lot of people can't quit. So what do you have any suggestions when somebody is really overworked like that, even on weekends? And how do they manage, how do you help them manage to find some positive pleasurable stuff rather than, because, you know, the negative pleasurable stuff is it's always convenient and easy. It's not, like the positive pleasurable stuff usually takes a little bit more work, like exercising, going for a walk, doing volunteer work, any of that good positive stuff takes more effort. But the negative ding dongs, like having a drink of alcohol, having, smoking a cigarette, taking drugs, taking, eating processed food, that stuff is so easy to do. So how do you help somebody like that?
Well, the easiest thing to do is go as quickly as you can to an animal shelter and get yourself a cat or a dog that needs rescuing and needs a home and needs love, because you will get so much pleasure and ding dongs from, being around a pet. The studies have been around forever, that not only do pets lower our blood pressure, but they give us that serotonin, they give us that good feeling that we need and help calm us. And plus you're constantly, in a sense, interacting with somebody other than yourself. So we're trying to get you out of your headspace, which is what's causing all these problems. And you're interacting with an animal. As I said, I have 20 rescued animals, and that keeps me busy all day long. And I'm talking to them all day long. I'm feeding them, watering them, brushing them, brushing their teeth, just taking care of them. So I think rescuing an animal is one of the greatest things. And then also finding pleasure. I think one of the quickest ways to change your mood is through music. So I think if you can find music that inspires you, I mean, how many people have ever heard the theme from Rocky and not be bouncing around and, boxing? It's like, it's very inspirational music. So find music that inspires you, find shows that inspire you, and then save those shows. In other words, you shouldn't just be binge watching shows. I think it's important to save those shows kind of as rewards. And with clients, I always use rewards. So I always say, hey, look why don't you go ahead and get this for yourself, wrap it or put it on the mantle and say, hey, when you accomplish XYZ, you're going to get that. Now, remember one of the things about dopamine, it's anticipation. You're anticipating what's going to happen when you have that chocolate. And so it's flooding your brain with all this pleasure. It's the same thing when we have a reward or we have a movie waiting for us at home. We're anticipating as we drive home. So we're getting that dopamine and we're starting to feel happy and excited about it. So I'd say, a pet, that you can rescue, I think is one of the most important things. Music, shows. And then also just, finding, the truth is we don't really interact with human beings as much anymore. We're always texting. I mean, I call and check on people all the time, and I prefer to be on the phone. Almost anytime I have interaction with people, I try to do it on the phone, because we're supposed to be communicating to one another via our emotions and our energies and the way we sound and the way we look. And just texting, there's something you're missing. It's just it's very robotic, and it kind of just really is kind of more of a primitive brain, not the executive functioning center. So I think those are important, to find people that you relate to and that you can have a conversation with that's a little bit deeper than how's the weather. But I think just trying to make a list, maybe what you want to do here, I don't know. Do you guys have these boards up? Do they stay up?
Well, these sessions are recorded, and then the chat is not saved with them because that's more private in case but people can listen to the replays. But we do have a forum, and people can post on the forum. Yeah. And
yes, so that what I'd suggest is, why don't you guys just start posting some of your ding dongs on the forum?
That's awesome.
And then people can learn. They're like, oh, I never thought about that. So like for me, obviously I've been doing activism since high school. And I mean, that's like a big part of what I do. And, I love the activism because I love making a difference. And so I think, just doing my daily activism throughout the day is something that I really enjoy doing. And I think, if you just start small, you don't have to do anything gigantic, but just start small. I always tell people, look, go to my site, Living with Harmony, and that's my sanctuary. Like, activism is just taking that site, copying it and sending it to Joe and Fred and Mary and say, hey, check this site out. That's activism. If you go on to Craigslist they'll ban you, or if you flag people that are selling animals, because you're not supposed to sell them, every time they get a flag, they get 3 flags and they're gone. That's activism. That's just activism doing something like that. So there's a lot of little things that you could do. I mean, my activism, it starts the minute I wake up till the minute I go to bed. So, and then animal care is around the clock. So there's lots of ding dongs going on there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And I like what you're talking about, having conversations with people. I remember one of the things that I used to do while I was still at my job. It wasn't, in the morning when I was driving to it, it was maybe a 25-30 minute drive. And so I would call like one of my, a good friend, and talk to them on my drive to work, because that kind of,
Yeah.
I would be really tense, and I have to really be, like you said, you have to pick who you're talking to very wisely, because there are some people who we're friends with, but they can be like, they can be energy vampires, right? They can just
Oh,
drain
yeah.
us of our
Yeah,
energy.
yeah, of course.
So you have to pick people that, kind of lift you up and make you feel
Yeah.
better. And they're non-judgmental, but you can, if you want to vent to them, they'll listen to you, and they'll just say, hey, I hear you, I understand, and I had a couple of friends that I would, if I was going to work and feeling like not so great about going in, I would call one of them and talk to them for 15-20 minutes on my way to work. And that always helped me out.
Yeah, I just maybe just always remember what I'm saying about the ding dong, because the ding dong is kind of it's the food ding dong. You remember when we were kids, ding dongs, and what were the other ones?
Twinkies.
Twinkies, yeah, right. So those were the things that, again, are turning artificially the brain on. But also the ding dong is kind of when the doorbell rings, or when you get a ding on your phone, right? You get, oh my God, I got a ding, and there's that dopamine blast, right? And so we get addicted to that. And see, the problem is that then steals your time away, ding dongs that way, when you want to get the ding dongs from having an animal, walking a dog, doing something pleasurable, where you got the ding dong, but there's no repercussions, there's no pain associated with it. It's not going to destroy your life, right? Because the other ding dongs are short-term pleasure, but they give you long-term pain. Right. The ding dongs I'm encouraging give you immediate pleasure, and then they give you long-term pleasure too. Because like when you go and exercise to get your ding dong, that's not only your immediacy, but then it's benefiting your bones and your muscle and your immune system. As a matter of fact, if you go to johnpierre.com, and then it'll say contact, and then it'll take you down to the bottom of the page, and you fill out your name and email for my newsletter, and it's going to send you a video I did on exercise. I think it's like 20 or 30 minutes on movement. So one of the things you definitely want to do is get the ding dongs from movement. And I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that have been, abusers of alcohol and drugs, especially drugs. When I get them to change addictions from drug addiction to exercise, they literally become addicted to it. And at some point I have to even be careful, because it's great they got rid of the drug, but they become an exercise addict due to all these neurotransmitters and everything, that I have to caution them. Let's go slow and steady here with your exercise. And the reason is because when you give up one drug, whatever the drug was, let's just say it's cocaine, and now suddenly you're exercising all the time, that's your drug of choice now, which is healthy. The danger is if you get hurt, you can't do that same intensity. So what do you think you go back to? Your original addiction, because it didn't, you're going to get pleasure snorting the cocaine, and there's no work involved. So if you do switch to exercise, make sure it's done slow and moderate. You don't need to be fanatical about it, because any addiction, we don't want to be addicted at the advanced level of life. You don't want to be addicted to anything. You want to be able to have that control and composure and have that calm, stable brain all the time.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to mention is, look at the core of what I teach is always based on love and compassion. And always, Shada always will say during interviews, the one thing JP has always taught me, if you love yourself, you don't hurt yourself. So remind yourself, when you're thinking about doing an action, is this going to help me or is it going to hurt me? And addictions are not really helpful, because now you're addicted. You have a ball and chain, and you're going to have a compulsion to continue doing it. So that's not a balanced lifestyle. So, ask yourself these questions. You start thinking a little bit more about caring about yourself. There's a type of psychology, it's called internal family systems. It was created by Dr. Richard Schwartz, and he created a whole system on it. And he has a book called No Bad Parts. And what they teach really in internal family systems is that we have lots of different parts psychologically. You know, there's almost like somebody who has, and this is not meant to be a negative thing, it's actually positive, but like multiple personalities, we have these different parts or personalities. And sometimes one of these parts takes over, and it's no longer is everyone at the dinner table getting along and they're planning a vacation where the son says, hey, I want to do this. And the daughter says, okay, I'm going to go look this up. And the dad says this, everyone works together. Suddenly one person thinks they're going to be in charge and they're controlling the other parts. And that's what happens to our bodies sometimes and mentally is there's a part that takes over. And many for us, it's an addictive part. And it takes over and it's running the show. And that's when we run into problems, when these parts take over. So you constantly have to do this inner work that I'm talking about. And if when I'm working with people, I've had people say, oh my God, I don't think I want to go in this direction. Yeah, no kidding. I get it. You don't want to go in that direction. I get it. Nobody does. That's like somebody eating salad when they can have Twinkies and ding dongs. Yeah, you're genetically wired to have the Twinkies and ding dongs. I get it. But what I'm saying is to get healed takes work. It's not easy. If you're just looking for some Dr. Joe and Dr. Mary and Dr. Fred to give you a diet and you think that's going to help up here, I can guarantee you it's not going to help up there. That takes additional work. It's great that you're eating those healthy foods, but there's a heck of a lot more deeper work that needs to be done other than diet. As a matter of fact, if you come to my conference in Chicago next Memorial Day, we rarely talk about food. Most of the work there is inner work, and it's movement, it's working on rituals. It's talking about, I'll bring in one of the best therapists around on trauma, and we're talking about things that go on and have happened to you in your life. So I do not just focus on diet. It's such a small part of what I do. Now, when I meet the average Joe on the street, yeah, of course. I mean, we need to try to get them to add more salads and whole grains and sweet potatoes and push some of those burgers and fries out. But after I work with them for a while and they get onto this program, then we start going into the real stuff that needs to be discussed.
Right. Yeah. JP, this is a question, and it's asking about childhood trauma from Roween. Do you think that working through childhood trauma, like being picked on by dad, drives our desire to eat?
Oh, well, yeah, of course, because you'll have people tell you that there's no such thing as overeating with trauma. Everyone overeats. Yeah, everyone overeats, but you eat even more when you have trauma, because you don't like the way you feel. You don't like the intrusive thoughts going in your brain. So you want them to stop. So you take a snort of cocaine, right? Now, everyone would agree. There's nobody who would deny that. You take a shot of whiskey, right? Well, why can't somebody acknowledge that eating Hostess Twinkies and ding dongs is going to still go ding dong in the brain? It does.
Right.
Yeah, you're dealing. It's kind of like I had a client that had severe food addiction, was 300 pounds. It was very difficult to watch her even function in life. And she drove to see me, and she said the red warning light came on her car. Now I want you to think about this, her logic, because this is how she lived her life. And I said, well, what did you do? I just turned the radio up and didn't pay attention. Oh, so you had a scent, the buzzer went off, and you didn't want to deal with it, right? Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that what she did? Mm-hmm. That's what she did with food. And here's what she did with her car. The warning light said, hey, look out, something bad can happen here. Oh my God, I don't want to deal with that. Turn the radio up and let's just drive, right? It's the same thing that happens with people. The trauma comes in, what dad or mom did, or Uncle Joe, or somebody, Fred who beat them up, or whatever trauma they had. Well, they don't like that thought. I got to get it out of my brain. Let's go have some ice cream. Oh, right? I mean, does that make sense, Zena? Because a lot of people debate this with me, and I don't want to be right. I'm just telling you my experience.
Right. Yeah, sure. It's funny. It's like, I do feel that, I always say that, well, I had a lot of stress, everybody had stress growing up, but whether I have stress or whether I have a good time or whether, whatever's going on in life, we all have to eat. It doesn't matter if we're stressed or whatever, we always have to eat. But a lot of times I feel like stress influences the choices that we make, because it can, exactly what you're saying. It's like, you want to self-medicate, and it's hard to self-medicate with whole foods. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, an apple is great, but a piece of apple pie is really going to medicate my brain even more. So I think that, to me, seems, at least that's been my personal experience, because I can medicate all over the place, but when I'm, when I'm stressed, I'm more likely, or when I've got some kind of traumatic thing that's happened to me, I'm more likely to medicate with food more. But the food I'm medicating with is usually unhealthy food. It's not, I'm not using healthy food to medicate with,
Yeah.
because that doesn't give me the same dopamine hit. So yeah, I do know what you're saying with, yeah, I definitely know where you're coming from with that. So.
And remember, there's a whole branches of psychology that agree with this. In other words, I'm just reporting on some of the science, and then I'm just reporting on what I've seen in 37 years of working with clients.
Mhm.
Now think about 37 years. 37 years is a long time to see clients. That's just not teaching. That's working with clients in and out of the office all the time. So I've seen, everybody from kids to military to FBI, US Marshals, to celebrities and actresses and musicians and professional athletes. So I've seen a wide variety of clientele. So I'm just reporting the science and then what I've observed in my clients.
Gotcha. So here's a question. Okay, so Rowena is asking, so uncovering it will help move she's asking if uncovering it will help move past it, and how long does it take to move past it? And is that, because I was going to ask you, so if you're working with a client, and let's say it was Rowena, and she has this issue that she wants to eat something because she's having some traumatic memories of some childhood stuff. What do you say to a client like that to help them deal with that, so that they're not turning to something that's hurting them? How do you get them to come out of that?
Well, first of all, I'm not replacing at all a trauma therapist at all, though I still can attend the seminars, and they're my clients. Some of the top presenters in the world are my clients. I'm very familiar with trauma, and I encourage people to go see a trauma therapist. Now, it's important to understand a therapist and a trauma therapist are almost light years apart. There's totally different training to be a trauma therapist. And most trauma therapists do things like EMDR, brain spotting, internal family systems, things like that. I had a client that had been in therapy a long, long time, and wasn't getting any help, and they had a lot of shame. Okay. And they were in their 50s, and they had shame since childhood. And so with that particular client, I did a few sessions and had them do some homework and things like that. And after about, I don't know, like maybe 3 or 4 sessions, they said, and remember, their whole life was about shame. And it was the greatest moment when they said this, JP, I find it ridiculous that I ever had shame. I have no shame now. This is ridiculous what I was thinking, because I was showing them how ridiculous. I actually used that word, and they loved that word. They said, JP, I love that word, ridiculous. And I said, whatever, Joe, I just want you to see how ridiculous this so-called shame that you have is, and here's why it's ridiculous, and it went on and blah, blah, blah. And that was great. I mean, that was something that happened pretty quickly, a couple sessions. Now, I think many of you who've heard me speak before maybe you've heard this story. I know, Zini, you have. And it's a story that I hold back the tears with, but, I had a client come to me that was 58, and at the age of, it was like 2, was adopted into a satanic family. And so all the atrocities that could be done to a child were done to her times 10. And so when she came into my office at 58, it was cold in Chicago, and she had a sweater on, and she was scratching herself like that, and the sweater moved up, and I saw the puncture marks. And so I talked to her about it, and she said she's been cutting basically her whole life. And I said, well, how long have you been in therapy for that? And, let's just say 40 years. So I said to her, are you telling me that you've been in therapy for 40 years? Psychiatrists, psychologists, psychiatric wards, medications, and no one could get you to stop cutting. She said, yeah. So to make a long story short, I did 2 sessions with her, and she never cut again. Now, the reason that happened had nothing to do with really psychology or mystical, magical, anything, or me being smart. It was because during the first session, she said, I can't afford any more sessions other than this one. And I said, you can only afford 1 session? She said, yeah. And I said, well, I got good news. All your sessions for the rest of your life are free. Now, remember, this lady was abused horribly. And she looked, and she paused, and was kind of, you could see, very confused. And then she said, well, but I can't, she wanted to make an excuse. She goes, I can't afford the foods you want me to get, which was just normal foods, blueberries and stuff and Ezekiel bread. And I said, well, that's okay. I said, I'm glad you can't afford them because now I can, and I'm going to buy them for you. And she said, is this a trick? Because remember, her whole life she was tricked. I said, no. I said, this is what normal people do for one another. They help one another. And then that was her session. And then I saw her again. But to paraphrase what she said to me is this is why I'm telling you this story, because I want you to understand how things can happen in an instant. And sometimes they take years. She said, when you first saw me, JP, she goes, you didn't want my money. She said, you didn't want to touch me. She said, you didn't want anything from me. My sessions are free and you're buying me my food. And she was basically explaining this is the first time in her life she felt unconditional love. And that's what got her to stop cutting. Nothing to do with me. Everyone here probably would have done the same thing. Here's a poor lady that had horrible abuse. She couldn't afford more than one session. My God, her sessions have to be free. Everyone would do that. That's normal. So that's why she stopped in an instant. Now, to go on the extreme end, yeah, I have some clients, like I have a client right now that is so depressed and lethargic and is on so many psychiatric meds. And it's a big push for her to go through a drive-through and get a hamburger with my suggestion of getting some extra lettuce and tomatoes. So she refuses to go shopping and she refuses to have food delivered to her house. So it's not like, and I've only seen her twice, but the point is I'm making good progress. So everyone is different. I can't tell you it's like therapy. Some therapists get results quickly. Some it could take years. So you have to find the right modality that works for them. And to be honest with you, there are some people that find a benefit from just being in therapy and not necessarily having that issue resolved because this is the first time in their life that they're having interaction with people who are listening and so forth. Does that make sense? Right. It's very complicated.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's going to depend on the person, on their situation, on the therapist that they choose. And all those things can be different, it's going to be different scenarios. So yeah,
and I'm not a therapist. And, I tell people all the time that I'll refer them to therapists, but I'm not a therapist. What I do, as you said, Zena, at the beginning, it's hard to put in a box what I do.
Yes.
But I like to just say to make people understand it the best, maybe we call it lifestyle enhancement. So it's working with your lifestyle, not only nutrition and fitness, but emotional and spiritual. It's working on all these different areas. So that's kind of what I do. But I'll tell you, I actually really try to get people not to see me because I know it's going to take a lot of work and I don't want somebody investing in seeing me and then, just them wasting sessions. I think it's far better to read the last 2 chapters of my first book, The Pillars of Health, because those 2 chapters are the core of everything. It's on love and compassion. And then get my Zoom series, which is online for 17 hours of stuff. And I've got, not only am I speaking in there, of course, but then I bring in like Dr. Furman's on there, Brenda Davis. I bring in some other people to talk about the pillars of of health in my first book, just kind of to validate what I've been saying forever.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so is that what you would, if somebody after here, they said, oh, I want to work with you, JP, would you recommend that they first go ahead and watch your video series? And that's going to be a lot less expensive, right? Because that's not very expensive.
Because I made it during the pandemic to help people. They wanted me to make it thousands of dollars to people helping. I said, no. I said, this is a pandemic. Let's get it really cheap for people. And it wasn't supposed to be 17 hours. I just kept adding every week because it was live when we filmed it, bonus segments, because I just wanted to keep giving them more and more. So it's like 17 hours. And it's based on my first book, The Pillars of Health, which is the core of everything I teach. And then, of course, my second book, Strong, Savvy, Safe, which is a women's guide to self-defense and safety, that deals with the emotional component of safety. So when you combine both of those books, you get a very balanced approach to what I teach.
Right. And so I want to tell our members here today that JP has very graciously agreed to be a regular guest. He'll be coming every other month. So the next time he'll be here will be November, I believe it's November 2nd. It's going to be the first Wednesday of November will be the next time he's going to come. And we talked about going through your book, basically, right, JP, kind of taking a chapter at each time and kind of talking about that topic. So I would encourage people, if they're interested, to go ahead and buy the book or if they have it already, maybe reread it. And it's not going to be like a book club. I mean, it's not going to be like where we're going to necessarily talk about each chapter like you would with a book club thing, but just so you know what's coming up, that
Yeah.
might be something that is worthwhile. And I think it's a great book for people just to read. Like you said, those last 2 chapters are wonderful. And I mean, the whole book is wonderful, but I do really love the fact, because you've told the story before, how your publisher didn't, or you had one publisher that was promising you big bucks to publish the book, and they wanted you to take out those 2 chapters, and you turned it down and went to a publisher where you didn't really get any money from them, or very little, and because they let you do it the way you wanted to. So that's how important those 2 chapters are. So people should know that. So I just want to read, because I know that you've got a client at 5. So I just want to read this one nice comment from Lori. She says, JP, I love the way you weave a story to relate experience. I just hope I can remember the stories when I need them.
They're all in my book.
They're all in your book. That's right.
The lady, the story about the woman that I worked with who stopped cutting, she's in there too. They're all things that happened whether I was working at a health food store or seeing clients or whatever. And there's some really interesting stories in there. I want to remind everyone, definitely, I have 2 sites. So johnpierre.com. Go, as soon as we're done here, fill out the form on the bottom where it says contact JP, because then you'll be on my mailing list, and then you'll get the free video, exercise video. But you'll also, if you're interested, Memorial Day weekend, we're having my conference in Chicago. And that's a pretty amazing event, because as I said, it's focusing on all the stuff in my book, not as much on food. And we bring in some kind of interesting surprise guests that are some of the people are the best in the world at what they do. I mean, there's literally nobody better than them. So yeah, definitely do that. And follow us on Instagram, The Living with Harmony. That's on the environment mostly. So you can follow us there.
Great. And I did put in the chat. Oh, thank you, Jesse. I did put both your websites in the chat area several times, and Jesse just added them again, so I didn't have to do that. So thank you, Jesse. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. This was wonderful, JP. Have heard the stuff before, but I can always listen to it again, because I want it to all just soak into my brain. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you had great questions, Zena, very astute. So thank you for those.
Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Okay, see you guys. I'll see you guys Saturday, whoever's joining us for the Saturday check-in. And tomorrow we have an exercise class with Angela, a live exercise class at 4 o'clock Pacific time with Angela. So I'll see you guys for that too. Okay, take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.